You want to live a tax-free lifestyle? Of course you do. But if you live in the United States, then too bad. The tax man's gonna get you somehow, somewhere. Okay, but seriously, stay to the end of this video because I've got a pretty cool little hack here that theoretically might work most of the time, but not 100%, but mostly how you can live a tax-free lifestyle. Okay, getting serious here. This, I think, how I put together this little scenario here, it's probably the closest that you can get to living in the United States, like in the actual 50 United States. You know, there's probably some offshore ideas you got here, but for real though, living in the United States, on the United States 50 within the states, I keep saying that, but how as close as you can get to living a tax-free lifestyle, okay? And this is the best that I could come up with. First off, let's talk about federal income tax. So in order to make this work, in order to get around the federal income tax man, it's best to have a lower income because the federal tax man doesn't tax you under a very certain, like, smaller amount of income. The easiest way to illustrate that is by using the standard deduction. So the standard deduction is an amount of taxes pretty much that any US citizen, any taxpayer doesn't have to pay taxes on. Okay, if you're single, that amount is super low, and if you're married, then the amount is double the single rate because there's two of you, and so that is actually kind of realistic. You can actually live on the double rate, but I think it would be really hard to live on the single rate. So the standard deduction for single people is $12,550. Head of household is a different filing status that's a little less common, but it's $18,800, and then if you're married filing jointly, then up to $25,100 of your income is not going to be subject to federal income tax on just like regular income. Now, it's important to know where you're getting that income from too, because in this case, if you're withdrawing, let's say you're financially independent, that's the scenario I'm going to be using here. You're financially independent and you're trying to avoid taxes for some odd reason. That's your main priority here. You're trying to avoid taxes but still live in the United States. For this scenario, this hypothetical scenario, if you're withdrawing from a traditional IRA, then you can withdraw up to the standard deduction and then you won't pay any income taxes. So you got to live a pretty frugal life. However, if you're withdrawing from a Roth IRA, theoretically, with the way that the rules work right now, and as we can see, the rules can change, but hopefully they stay the same. For a Roth IRA, then you can pretty much withdraw any money out of there because the money's already been taxed. So theoretically, you can withdraw from your Roth IRA and you can live on any amount and not pay any federal income taxes, theoretically. So that's how you're going to have to deal with federal income taxes in this scenario. Just be frugal and don't spend that much money. Therefore, you don't make that much income. And no matter which state you're living in the United States, you're going to owe the federal tax man. So that's how we're going to avoid that in this hypothetical scenario. We're going to live very frugally and make very little money and spend very little money. Now next it comes to state income taxes. Okay, so here's another tax that you want to try to avoid. So not all states have an income tax. Some states do, some states don't. Most of them do in some form or another, but there are a few that do not tax you at all. So let me list it off for you here. If you are a resident of the state of Alaska, Florida, Nevada, New Hampshire, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Washington State, or Wyoming, then theoretically you're not going to pay any state income taxes. There might be some small nuances in there, like if you're making a certain type of income, but generally speaking, those are the tax-free, income tax-free, I should say, states that we have here in the 50 United States. Now, more specifically for this example, I'm going to give it to you. You are going to be living in one of those states in the example that I'm going to put together at the end, so still stay to the end. Because next up we have what's known as sales tax, another very common tax that is assessed by states how they make their money. Some states don't make their money through income tax, like the state I live in, which is Tennessee currently. I moved to Tennessee. They don't have an income tax, but they have an exceedingly high sales tax. So most of my income or most of my spending, I'm going to pay a very high sales tax. Right now where I live, usually it's going to be 9.5%. So everything that I buy is almost 10% more expensive because of taxes. However, there are some states that do not levy any kind of sales tax. And that means that if you want to avoid some sales tax, you're gonna have to go shopping in those states that don't tax things that you buy. In this case, you're gonna want to go shopping in the states of either Alaska, Delaware, Montana, New Hampshire, or Oregon. Okay, so those are the states currently right now, at least as of 2021 when I'm making this video, those do not have a statewide sales tax. Now some of those states actually theoretically, they could have local municipalities, local governments that could still tax you on stuff, but we'll just assume, for easy thing, that I can't look at every single local municipality, that's a funny word, I can't look at every local government and see what they're taxing, so we'll stick with those states. Go shopping in one of those states. The next big tax that you definitely probably want to avoid is known as property taxes, and this is probably the most difficult that you're going to try to avoid, because if you own a property pretty much anywhere in any state, you're probably going to pay property taxes. Now, some states do have different things where you probably could get away with not paying taxes, like if you're disabled or if you're over a certain age and you have a very low income, maybe if you're a military veteran and you have disabilities as well through service. So there are some places where you can avoid the property tax bill in some circumstances, maybe even like some special credits for buying, special tax credits for buying in a certain area, whatever they may be. Now, but that is very, very niche, and so the best way that I've come up with here in order to avoid the property taxes is to simply rent your house and not own. Therefore, you're not actually paying for property taxes, you're just paying for the rent to use that space, and the person that owns the property that you are renting is paying the property taxes. Now, you could argue that theoretically you're paying the property taxes in that way, but nuances are going to be nuances. So if you want to avoid the property taxes in this hypothetical scenario, you're going to be renting and not owning. All right, and one more very important thing that I want to note here, that if you're actually going to be theoretically living this, hypothetical, like very, very low tax, almost 100% tax-free lifestyle while you're financially independent, then you're going to want to also avoid capital gains tax. So there's a lot of stuff in the works right now, at least as I'm making this video, about capital gains, as there always is. But currently, the way the rules are structured, you can make some capital gains, you can realize some capital gains and pay 0% income tax on certain amounts, as long as they are long-term capital gains. And in order to be a long-term capital gain, you simply have to hold something for more than 1 year, which is pretty darn easy. That's not really that long of a time. It works out in our favor. Right now, if you are single, federally, you can make up to $40,000 of long-term capital gains and pay no income taxes. And you can pretty much double that if you're married filing jointly, and that is up to $80,000. And you have to pay no income taxes on those long-term capital gains. And remember that those long-term capital gains, you're only going to actually be taxed on them if that was theoretically invested in a regular brokerage account. All right, if you're withdrawing money from IRAs, like a traditional IRA, you're only going to pay taxes on the amount you withdraw from the traditional IRA, not any capital gains or anything that happens within the account. And if you're withdrawing from a Roth IRA, you're not going to pay any taxes on anything that happens within the account. And with the Roth IRA, you're not actually even going to pay taxes on any money that comes out as income, at least as the rules are today. So, this would perfectly work out a lot better if you were withdrawing from a Roth IRA. And now here is the most fun part, and that is putting all this together, a real life hypothetical scenario of where you'll have to be and what you'll have to do in order to live a tax-free lifestyle and avoid all those taxes that I just mentioned. But one thing you're not going to want to avoid is that like button. Please do not avoid that like button, and instead go down to this video and hit that like button, click it with your mouse or tap it with your finger. I really appreciate that, and it really does help me out. It helps spread this message, this video, to other people who do need to see it. So thank you so much for hitting that like button. But now we can move on to the real cool hypothetical scenario here. So get ready, sit on the edge of your seats, because this is what you got to do. And believe me, I am seriously consider doing this, because no one likes anteing up the dough to the tax man. Anteing up the dough. Okay, but this is what you got to do, okay? So theoretically, this should work in theory. Okay, so we know that one of those states where you can live that you pay no state income tax is going to be the state of Washington, Washington State. Okay, so there right now, Washington State doesn't have an income tax. So for this example, you're going to want to live in a town or nearby this one city called Vancouver, Washington. Okay, so Vancouver, Washington is north of Portland, Oregon. So it's going to be almost like right there on the border of South Washington, okay, and Northern Oregon. And here's the reason you're going to want to live there. Because while you're in Washington, you are a resident of Washington State, you shouldn't theoretically pay any income taxes on the amount that you withdraw. So if you're withdrawing from a traditional IRA, you shouldn't pay any income taxes on that amount, because it is a tax-free state. And then when you want to avoid your sales tax, you're going to have to go over the border a little bit to Oregon, because Oregon does not levy any kind of sales tax as of now. So you can go over there and do all of your shopping in Oregon, and you'll avoid the sales tax. So boom, right off the bat, you're avoiding your state income tax and you're avoiding your state sales tax and your local municipality state sales tax and things like that. And also, if you're keeping your withdrawals low, then you're avoiding the federal income taxes. If you're withdrawing from a traditional IRA, you're avoiding those federal income taxes. If you're withdrawing from a Roth IRA, you don't even have to worry about it anyway because it's income tax free. In that case, also, theoretically, if you were living completely off of a Roth IRA, then you could live in any sales tax-free state and do all of this anyway. But getting back to our example, it's a lot more fun to talk about than just living out the Roth IRA. That seemed too easy of a challenge. Okay, so when you're living in this Vancouver, Washington, you're going to have to rent your residence because you don't want to pay that property tax. So you're going to just be paying rent and the landlord will pay their own property tax. So there, boom, you're avoiding property taxes in that way. And if you're going to need a little bit more money, then you're somehow going to have to realize some long-term capital gains because those are much more favorable tax rates that you shouldn't be paying any income tax on in the state of Washington or federally, as long as you stay within those, those limits I mentioned earlier. So this is how it would play out. This is how much money you could theoretically withdraw. All right. So if you are single, you can do the $12,550 and that's going to avoid federal income taxes. Then you can realize capital gains of up to an additional $40,000 as a single person. That puts your total possible income at $52,550 if you are single and you're paying no state income tax or federal income tax or capital gains tax. If you're a head of household, then it's $18,800 for that standard deduction plus $53,600 of long-term capital gains at 0%, and that should be about $72,400 total possible maximum if you're head of household. Then if you're married filing jointly, then you can do $25,100 of the standard deduction and plus $80,000 of long-term capital gains per year. So that puts you at a maximum of $105,100 of total income that's going to be taxed at 0%. And a fun little fact that's not so fun that I was reading about now is that apparently Washington State recently had something about a capital gains tax, and so I guess they are actually having a capital gains tax, but it looks like it's only for very wealthy individuals as usual. For now, we'll see how that goes for now, but just keep that in mind as well. But that is theoretically where you'd have to do. You're living in Vancouver, Washington, you're avoiding state income tax, you're shopping in Oregon, you're avoiding sales tax, you're getting long-term capital gains, you're avoiding capital gains taxes, and you're renting instead of owning so you don't have to pay any property taxes. And that is what I could think of how you could almost live a tax-free lifestyle. But of course, as I mentioned before too, if you just have a Roth IRA, then you can theoretically do this in any sales tax-free state. You can rent in any sales tax-free state, and then theoretically you could also avoid pretty much all taxes as well. But one thing that you cannot avoid at all, this other video that I created, a full guide to minimizing your income taxes so that you can achieve financial independence. Now, if you have not watched that video, make sure you watch that video. It's gonna pop up right next to me. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'm Zach from OnCashflow.com, and I hope to see you next time.